Welcome to ELF Center 4 for our year-long theme, Designs in Nature. This is our unit, Snow, Tracks, and Traces.
Okay, Center 4 is called Tricky Tracks and Window Shade Story. And students are going to become investigators and puzzle solvers with this center. You're going to start by talking about how animal tracks are marks that are left by a moving animal, and you can find the route an animal takes just by following their tracks. And those tracks can actually tell a story. Included in this bin are a couple of colorful laminated examples of critter tracks with a little poem that goes with it, and then an example also of investigating what story might be behind tracks in 4 different clue sets. So you could use that to kind of warm them up. There's also a book called In the Snow Who's Been Here that you could leaf through. But you're going to turn your focus to these copycat pages. And with the younger kids, you're going to start out by giving each of them, or in pairs, this laminated page and make sure it's the one with the blanks. There's a key, and then there's blanks. And you're going to ask the students to brainstorm and think about what different animals might have made these shapes. And in order to get them thinking about that, you want to talk about how different animals walk. How does a raccoon walk? How does a bear walk? How does a deer walk? And in thinking about that, that'll hopefully help them think about how their feet move and what kind of track they would leave behind. So then as a group, have students in the younger grades together. You can identify it, so you could just write on one of these together. They could all be looking at one in front of them, but just write on the one in front of you to save time. And hopefully, using the key and some brainstorming, you'll be able to identify most of them.
Another thing that you could talk about when you're looking at this sheet would be if there's claws, how many toes, so this would be kind of back to our adaptations unit, but it would certainly be something to look at, and so they really get to thinking what kind of animal could have made these prints.
Right, yeah. Like, what kind of feet do the animals have? If they have hooves, well, then is a hoof going to have toes? And things like that. Okay. So then for the older grades, after they've gone through and had this discussion, then you'll move, and for the older grades, if you choose to, they can each have their own paper to identify. That's up to you as the coordinator of the center. Again, if you choose to do that, you'll need to make copies ahead of time on your own. You move to part 2 of Tricky Tracks, and here you are again trying to transfer your knowledge from this activity to this activity. What made these different tracks? Where were they going? What were they doing? And so students can spend some time working on that.
So this is laminated. There's part 3.
Yeah. So then part 3.
I'm sorry. So do these keys match up to that chart? So like number 2 will be whatever number 2 was on here?
They do not.
No, they do not.
Nope, they don't, because like number 2 is number 4.
Okay.
So you'll have to use some very scientific investigation skills as the coordinator of this center, and students will as well. But giving you some more clues is copycat page part 3, which puts the animals in the same location as those little circles.
So it's kind of a key.
Yeah. So where there was a bear track with a circle, now there's a bear, for instance. And these you will use, if I refer back to the outline, it tells you that you're looking at these groups and you're trying to have the students determine what animals made the different tracks. You're doing that in part 2 again. So you're taking your previous knowledge from part 1, where you identified things, now applying it to a real life kind of scenery. And then in part 3, you can discuss the difference, what kind of what story, the difference between what you thought went on here and what's going on in the story picture here. Is that making sense? Then, after you've done that and spend whatever amount of time you think you want to on that, is this really awesome window shade story. And this will be in the elf closet. So make sure and look for it. And there's 2 of them. Whoops. So this story, this is a whole story that the students need to brainstorm what went on. What did the dog do when it left its home? What came down here and made these tracks and messed around down there? What kind of story can they formulate just creatively off the top of their heads as a group to tell what happened in this picture with all the animals that might have been here? Included in the bin is a small laminated version of that story. And words. So it turns out, if I had paid attention ahead of time, that it will also, this gives kind of a summation of what a story that might have happened. So I would read this afterwards. I would let the kids kind of formulate their own story, but this is a clue to you to look at first, so you can help direct them and helping and guide them in creating a story. And but it should be a fun story for them to brainstorm together and use their knowledge of how tracks tell a story.
Also in the outline, there's a smaller, shorter story, I think. At the very end of the outline on center, whatever this is, center 4.
There it is.
It
yes.
shows, excuse Emmy's notes, but it shows a little shorter story. Again, after you run the center one time, you'll know what all these tracks are, and so, but you definitely want to preview that story before you have the kids brainstorm, so you can kind of direct them as to say, oh, well, what do you think happened here, and where was that dog going?
And to help them make sure they get all the parts of the story too. Yeah.
Great.
So that is center 4. Figure out the story that tracks tell in the snow. And if you have any questions, you can email us at mitchellelf@gmail.com.